we've seen the Federal Reserve hike rates so aggressively, and still it looks like they're expected to hike in May. So for me, I'm in the camp that at some point this does impact the global economy and the domestic economy. And I do see us slipping into a recession in the second half of 2023. So that's really where I'm at. I think that the markets right now, if you look at valuations on stocks, the S&P 500, it's at a relatively high level where the markets are not anticipating that. So to me, it puts me in a position where if it doesn't happen, valuations are probably where they are already. And if it does happen, then valuations need to come in.
Bitcoin price action is right on track when it comes to sealing new all-time highs, new data suggests, with Bitcoin up over 70% in 2023 and far from its $15,600 lows in November 2022. Analysts are already considering the role of next year's block subsidy halving, set to cut the amount of BTC miners mint per block from 6.25 BTC to 3.125 BTC. The upcoming halving represents an emission decrease exactly like others that preceded it. Hello and welcome to Money Talks. In today's video, founder and chief market strategist at InTheMoneyStocks.com and verified crypto investing, Gareth Soloway updates about Bitcoin's current market standing, the final bull run in crypto, and his outlook for Bitcoin in 2023.
The dollar is definitely hugging and what I have here, and I don't know if you can pop up my chart here, but basically, much like you, so you have the higher low, you also have this longer term trend line right through here, and we've just been kind of hammering on it. So as of now, anyways, that's your support level. Now, what'll be interesting is to watch if we start trading up into this level. Do we break above it, or does it stall and eventually break to the downside? My guess is eventually it'll break to the downside, but I agree with you that short term, it's very decent odds that we'll have a push up. Way too much bearish sentiment on the dollar. Just like in reverse, you have way too much, for me at least, way too much bullish sentiment right now on Bitcoin. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin isn't going to go eventually higher, but the euphoria out there is definitely a red flashing light for me. But one of the things I'm watching very carefully is you basically have Bitcoin now just, number one, piercing the even numbers. So I'm not sure in trading how much you pay attention to even numbers, but I found in trading that, number one, the retail investor puts stops at even numbers. So number one, generally those stops will get taken out because the algos will pierce them, which will then take out the short stop, and ultimately it gets max euphoria, right? When you see all of a sudden a 3 instead of a 2 in front of Bitcoin, 20,000s to 30, it just creates that like, oh, I got to get in now because here goes the run. And those usually denote short-term tops. But then also, what I think is fascinating on Bitcoin is that you have so much former trading areas right in this 30,000 level, right? So if we look at the bull market from 2021, when it dumped out, this was the low. So psychologically, and you can see it right over here too, before it broke down, that was a huge, huge level. So it makes sense that right around 30,000, this is going to be a major psychological level for Bitcoin to try to get through. It doesn't mean it can't pierce it, like you said. I mean, it's already pierced 30,000. But for me, this is the big level to test, whether or not can it get above this level and then can it hold above this level. So yeah, it's interesting, really interesting.
Would you say that's one of your invalidation points to the downside? Do you still think 15.5 will be broken?
Yeah, so this is my key level. So for me, if it were to get above this area here, let's say 30,500 is kind of that line in the sand, down sloping line, flat line. So if we were to stay above this for a certain amount of days and really start establishing it as a support level, then I think you have to say that the low is probably it, right? Based on that. Now, if we gets rejected here and we start breaking some of these technical supports, then I do think that things could get nasty very, very quickly, especially if we see the stock market take a big leg down, the risk off trade start to come back in. So to me, this is a huge level. For me, psychologically, like there's got to be so much. I mean, just think about this, like, think about the people that bought Bitcoin here, and then they thought they were just, going to print money to 100,000 to beyond. And then they came back, they're like, okay, I'm break even. And all of a sudden they find themselves back in. So there's a lot of those people psychologically that'll say, okay, this is a level, I'm back to even after being down 50%. Let me exit the trade at this point. So it just creates a lot of resistance.
Meanwhile, in an analysis late last month, Data resource econometrics offered additional insight into recent performance. New all-time highs are also due, it agreed, bar a macroeconomic recession distorting the roadmap. Bitcoin's price action suggests a bottom has formed, but with an impending global recession, it's premature to assume. Economic uncertainty will increase demand for safe havens, but Bitcoin still trades very much like a risk asset. As Cointelegraph reported, the belief that the 2024 halving cycle will continue the good times has gone nowhere during the latest bear market. Philb, a co-founder of the trading suite Decentrader, recently doubled down on his conviction that Bitcoin's all-time high next cycle will come in 2025 and see a BTC price tag of around $180,000. He noted that as time passes, Bitcoin price gains will see a tapering effect. Smaller comparative gains in percentage terms with each cycle.
What's interesting, at least from my perspective, and this is, again, I love this fact that we differ in these ways, is that I was thinking about real estate earlier today, and I'm kind of saying to myself, okay, how do you come up with a bull case for real estate? Because if the economy stays healthy, then interest rates, in theory, are probably going to have to stay higher for longer, which makes it more expensive to buy a house. Now, granted, you're talking about 40-year mortgages, 80-year. I mean, if you do spread out the costs like that, it does bring the cost down, or the monthly payment. But then on the other side, I was thinking, okay, well, if the economy weakens, interest rates start coming down. We've even seen that here in the U.S. The 30-year has come in because expectations are for a weaker economy. But then if you have a weaker economy, people are losing their jobs. There's not as much job security. And so people would be a little bit more hesitant to buy homes, even with lower interest rates. So I was really, again, I didn't really contemplate the longer 40-year or 80-year type mortgages. But for me, I was having such a hard time figuring out how real estate starts to really gain and go up again, at least in the near term. Yeah, and I mean, so the one thing about my kind of recession call, and this is where I do differ with other bears, is like you have the Peter Schiffs of the world calling for like mega depressions and this.
They call it every year, don't they?
Right. But for me, it's not. I don't really see it being a recession that is very deep. It's more like kind of this dragging out, slower economy that it's not a collapse economy. It's like a small recession, but it just lasts for a really long time due to the fact that I see inflation staying slightly elevated and not allowing the Fed to come to the rescue. So it's kind of a weird scenario where I do actually see, like, so you have the 100-year cycle. I don't know how into cycles you are, but like with COVID, you had obviously the Spanish flu. Basically, it was almost a perfect 100-year cycle. And then late in the 20s, now you're coming into the Great Depression cycle as well. And so I think that's where you really get the big issues of the bigger collapse, like really where we could be in store for a depression type scenario. But yeah, at least my recession is more of like one that kind of puts you to sleep. It's not like you don't have 20% unemployment or 15 or 10% unemployment.
Might be like a shambling
7% unemployment, and things just are kind of crappy, but they're not horrible, Yeah, and that's kind of like what I'm envisioning is more like a scenario where you have this kind of, well, it's almost like the patient's on life support. So the patient's not dead yet, right? Dead would be depression, but the patient's being kept alive, but it's not really it's not a healthy condition. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, where it's like, okay, we're alive, but we're not really living a good life here. It just kind of is what it is. And then eventually that next phase brings us to kind of the horrible part. But yeah, it's interesting. And one of the things I keep on watching for too is the regulation, right? When do we see the regulation be unveiled for the crypto markets from the SEC? We're seeing, I think Binance got sued recently. I mean, there's so many different lawsuits that are being pushed out, but I want to know the regulation. Like for me, that's one of the reasons why I can't put a ton of money in Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency yet. I mean, I certainly have small dabblings. I do swing trades. But for me, it's like, okay, well, if you don't know the rules of the game, how do you play that game, right?
So what are your thoughts about Gareth Soloway's prediction? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon with the next video. Thank you so much for watching.